it took a little while for her to say to Jesus, "I'll do it in God's way, not mine." And she credits her Christian upbringing for allowing her to receive all that disturbing information from her birth mother with grace and with mercy. And she told us how she found herself moved to compassion for her birth mother, particularly after hearing the anguish and the regret that her birth mother had endured for all those years. I think we will seldom meet a woman more resilient than Claire is. And it gives me great pleasure to ask Claire to address us again on her topic, "Life is always worth it." Claire.
Good afternoon again. Y'all enjoying the conference? Yeah? Good. Well, yesterday I told y'all we talked about some funny stereotypes that we have about, or that y'all have about Texans. We wear cowboy boots and cowboy hats and live in our houses with our guns and fishing poles, and a lot of that was true, and I just wanted to share a few things that I've learned that you say in New Zealand that are a little bit different than what we say at home. So, a couple days ago, we were driving to Tauranga, and did I say it right? We were driving there, and I was asking the lady that was driving us around, I said, I want to take some things home that I can't find at home, for my family and for kids. And she said, okay, well, we have a lot of kiwi lollies here. And I thought, okay, kiwi flavored lollipops or lolly doodle, what is a kiwi lolly? And she said, it's candy. And I thought, oh, okay, candy, kiwi flavored candy. So I went into the store and I asked the guy, I said, I want to buy some kiwi flavored candy that I can't find at home you only sell in New Zealand. And he said, kiwi flavored candy? I said, oh yeah, kiwi lollies. And he said, oh, okay, and he starts pulling out these chocolate-covered candies or lollies, chocolate-covered lollies and pineapple-flavored lollies and sour lollies. Needless to say, I didn't walk out of that store with any kiwi-flavored lollies. And I thought, this is so strange. And I got in the car and I kind of forgot about it. And then as I kept meeting people, I realized, oh my gosh, kiwi is what you call yourselves, so kiwi lollies means they're only found here. And so I kind of laughed at myself, and I told this story, and the lady that was driving us around, she said, oh yeah, I love lollies, I'm a lollyholic. And I laughed. Another thing that's been funny, different little saying is she'll ask me, do you need anything out of the boot? And I'm looking down at her boots and I'm thinking, what do you mean, do I need anything out of your boot? It's called the trunk in Texas. Well, we were driving out into the country, or into the boondocks, as we call it, and she said, oh, aren't these some lovely wop-wops? I just laughed. We took some tiki tours, and she told us all about her rallies, and I thought, what in the world are rallies? And she said, you know, those people we're related to, and all I could think of was Eminem going, yo, these are my rallies. It's been a really fun time being here. I had to get y'all back, you see, because you laughed so much at Texans yesterday. Well, I know there may be some people here that weren't here yesterday, and I just want to give a recap of a little bit of what I talked about yesterday. I'm adopted, and my sister had met her birth mother a few years ago, and I got to thank my sister's birth mother for my sister, and it made me realize that I hadn't taken the time to thank my birth mother, and so I decided I would do that. And when I met my birth mother, she told me that I had actually survived her abortion, and I was actually a twin, and my twin had not survived the abortion, but I had, and so my life is a miracle. And when I was born, I had a lot of complications, and I was born at 3 pounds, which is 1.5 kilos. And so anyway, I shared a lot about that yesterday, and getting out of our comfort zone and getting involved in pro-life activities, but even more so talking about it in your communities and talking about it with your family and your friends, because this tragedy that we call abortion, this Holocaust that's happening, is real, and it's taking the lives of our own family members. And so anyway, I started speaking, I started sharing the story as God took me out of my comfort zone. And one of the first times I ever shared my story, I shared it at a post-abortive conference where most of the people in the room had either had an abortion or participated in an abortion somehow. And after I spoke, I walked off the stage, and this lady came up to me, and she gave me a hug. She squeezed me so tight, and she said, hugging you and hearing your forgiveness for your birth mother, I feel like my children have forgiven me. I know they have, but it's just so real seeing you and hearing you. And she said, 15 years ago, I aborted my twins. And I heard this and I thought, wow, and we talked, and she told me that since then she has since come to know the Lord, and she started this ministry, and what she does is she takes these baby shoes and she'll have a display across an entire stage of hundreds of baby shoes, and there's a piece of paper attached to those baby shoes, and it has a spot where you can write the name of the baby that you know that's life was lost to abortion, and you can write the name of that baby and a letter to that baby. And she offered this to me, and she said, do you know the sex of your twin? And I said, no, my adoption papers, they're very vague, and my birth mother doesn't remember a lot. She's blocked out a lot, and so we really don't know. And she said, well, God can reveal that to you. And I thought, okay, lady, you are way too charismatic for me. And I took about 5 steps in the opposite direction, and I knew. You see, when my parents were trying to have children, they tried for 7 years, and they weren't able to have children of their own. And God gave them 2 girls. But what they had prayed for and what they had told the adoption worker that they wanted when they asked, you know, what's your plan and what are your hopes for adoption, they told the adoption worker that they wanted girls, because if they could have children biologically, they wanted to have a son. Because in Texas, you know, we do this funny thing, and my dad's dad was a senior and he was a junior, and so his son would have been the 3rd, and he would have been able to pass on his family name. And so they said, we would like to adopt girls in the hopes of having a son biologically. And the adoption worker looked at my parents and said, well, you need to be ready for whoever God has for you and whatever God has for you. And so she sent them home and said, you need to go home and pray about it and come back when you're ready. And so my parents, they went home and they prayed about it, and they came back and they said, okay, we're ready. We're ready for whoever God has for us. And my parents were given 2 girls to adopt as their own. And they never got their son. And so when that lady asked me, or when she said, you know, God can reveal that to you, and I took 5 steps in the opposite direction thinking she was crazy, I stopped and I knew. I knew that my parents did get their only son, because when I was little, I knew something was missing. And when my birth mother told me about her abortion, some of the pieces of the puzzle started fitting together. But when I stopped in my tracks that day, I knew that I had a twin brother. Because when I was little, I had asked, where's my brother? It wasn't, I want a brother, can you adopt a brother? It was, something's missing, where is he? And so that was really neat for God to reveal that to me. And so a lot of times I ask myself, I ask God, what if my brother had been here? What if my dad had had his only son and had been able to hunt and fish and do the things that Texan guys love to do with his only son? How much more special would that have been? And I could go on in asking the what ifs. But for me and my family, the what ifs, they don't matter, because God's plan, it was perfect. It was perfect. But so often we're tempted to ask those what ifs. What are we missing? Who are we missing? And I want you to think about that today. What are we missing? Who are we missing? We know that we're missing 1/3 of us, of our families. And so who are we missing? There's a lot of reasons that people have abortions, and I know that you heard about some of that this morning, and I'm going to talk about some of that again because it's so important. There's so many reasons that people will have an abortion, so many excuses that people will use. Some of them include rape, incest, mental and physical disabilities, danger to the mother, the age of the mother, just inconvenience. All of those things are reasons that people have to have an abortion, and for ages, people have been questioning God. Why? Why, God, do you allow suffering? And what's the purpose of someone's life with complications? And I think he answers that for us briefly in John 9, where it says, as he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. God has a perfect plan. He has a good plan. And he has a reason for each of our lives, regardless of the difficulties, regardless of the complications or hardships. When I was younger, I had a babysitter named Gail, and Gail went to our church, and so I grew up with her. I stayed at that church for a long time, and Gail had a little girl named Riley Jane. And Riley Jane was born with multiple disabilities, including an obstructed airway. She had extremely low muscle tone. She came home from the hospital at 3 months old with a tracheostomy here to help her breathe, and it had oxygen connected to it. and she had a gastrointestinal tube so that they could feed her through that. She had these for the rest of her life because she needed them. They were a necessity. Riley Jane, her mom says that her smile was beautifully contagious. She never walked and she never talked, but she could light up a room with her smile. She was so content and happy most of the time when she was not in pain. She went to school part-time. She enjoyed vacations with her family, trips to her grandparents' house, and she loved music. I had the privilege of knowing Riley Jane, and I met her when I was 17, and her mom was looking for people who could help take care of Riley Jane so that she could run her errands or spend time with the rest of her children, and so I volunteered. And when I first met her, I fell in love with her. She would lay on the floor and her head would be propped up with pillows, and I would hold her in my lap and rock her, and I would sing to her, and we would read books, and she smiled all the time. Her mom would dress her in pretty dresses, even though she had so many tubes, and it took so long to get her dressed. She still knew that her little girl was worth being dressed as a princess, and she would put bows on her head, and in Texas we believe every little girl needs a bow bigger than their head, and so she would put bows on her head, and she was just so calm. She was so happy. In 2012, Riley Jane, she passed away, and I attended her memorial service, and there was over 1,000 people there to support her family, but more than that, because they were there because Riley Jane had touched and changed their lives. People told story after story of how Riley Jane had changed their lives, and there were tears, but most of all, the memorial service for Riley Jane, it was a celebration of her life. They played a video, and the song was, "Isn't She Lovely? Isn't she beautiful?" And she was. And at the end of the memorial service, we released hundreds of pink balloons into the sky, and it was beautiful, just like Riley Jane. She changed my life, and I believe that I truly began my pro-life work back then before I even knew it. God blessed Riley Jane's family with another miracle. Riley Jane's mom said, a little over a year after Riley Jane's death, I discovered that I was pregnant with a little girl again. To our shock, Bailey is her name, was diagnosed with Down syndrome in utero with a blood test early on in my pregnancy. We were nervous for many reasons, but the primary reason was because she will most likely outlive us. I'm now 50, and my husband is 56. In fact, as I perused the internet while pregnant, I found that most women my age chose to abort a late-in-life pregnancy. But God has shown his faithfulness over and over again. He's got this. Bailey is amazing. She is so full of joy and giggles, and everything that she does physically is such a big accomplishment, as her sister never rolled or sat up. Bailey is not only doing that, but she is going to walk and talk and be used by God. So fun for us. Our boys adore her. She has definitely brought us so much joy back into our home. God is so good to give us this gift. So we don't really see her as a baby with Down syndrome. We see her as Bailey. She is her unique person, just as Riley Jane was. We are all thankful for who we are because of these two. We are more patient, we are more accepting, we are more dependent on God, and more aware of his gifts. It's such an encouraging testament to how God cares for us, and he's given them such great gifts. But the world, we so often don't see circumstances like that as incredible gifts. 37% of women getting abortions identify themselves as Protestant Christians. 28% of women getting abortions identify themselves as Catholic. On average, women have at least 3 reasons for choosing an abortion. 3/4 say that having a baby would interfere with their life, with their work, with their daily schedule. Another 3/4 say they cannot afford a baby. And 1/2 say they don't want to be a single parent. They don't have a spouse. Only 12% say of women include a physical problem or complication for having an abortion. 1% of that are because the woman has been raped. Isn't it sad that the numbers are lower for the amount of abortions being performed due to a complication or a reason, as it is stated in the New Zealand abortion laws? LifeSite News addresses this issue, and they say that there are all sorts of circumstances that people point to as justification for their support of abortion. Since none of these circumstances are sufficient to justify the killing of human beings after birth, they're not sufficient to justify the killing of human beings before birth. What if the child is unwanted? They say one of the historic mantras of the abortion industry goes like this: every child is a wanted child. It sounds noble enough until you realize what their solution to unwantedness is. If a child isn't wanted, they argue, then it shouldn't be born. The problem, of course, is that if the child is already conceived, the only way to keep said child from being born is to kill it. How do they justify such violence? Often by arguing that it is better for the child to be dead than for the child to be unwanted. Then they go on to say, even if the biological parents want nothing to do with their offspring, there are families all over the nation waiting desperately to adopt a baby. Families who are willing to adopt diseased babies of any race or ethnicity. And isn't that true? I shared with you yesterday how the man had been trying for over 20 years to have a child with his wife, and when he heard the number that there were 38 abortions performed every single day in New Zealand, that one of those babies could have been his. And I shared with you how my parents, they struggled to have children, and for 7 years they tried to have children, and they did adopt. But some people, they aren't able to adopt for some reason. Or maybe the reason is because the child that they were meant to adopt lost his or her life to abortion. The sad reality is that while God views and creates all life equally precious and valuable, we as a society often choose abortion out of our selfishness and our convenience, not because of any of the exceptions that we just talked about. However, as a society, we tend to focus on these exceptions for some reason, and I believe that it's to justify our actions and get closer to a society where we push abortion on demand, without reason, without excuse, without exception. I spoke at a rally in Austin, and we had protesters that came, and as they usually do in my area, and it was so sad to see these women, and they were hurting. They were really hurting. And they had these signs, and it said, "Abortion without apology." And they meant it. And we just knew that they were hurting. And guys, as pro-life Christians, as pro-life Catholics, we have to be for all life. We have to fight for all life. Because that woman that's holding that sign that says abortion without apology and that is cursing at me and spitting at me, her life is just as valuable as that child's life that is in the womb at the risk of abortion. We have to be for all life. As I travel and speak and share my testimony, I have the privilege of meeting some incredible people. And about a year ago, I got to meet a girl named Robin. Robin conceived her son AJ in rape. Robin says, "When I became a college sophomore the fall season of first semester, I met a guy and I compromised my standards. And in a year, I started down a bad path of being away from who I was and what was right. I kept thinking as long as I tried to do the right thing and was finally married, everything would get back on track and we'd be okay. Little did I know I would still be caught in a life of different forms of abuse, lies, manipulation, and a husband's unfaithfulness in heart and mind. I wrongly thought the abuse during our engagement would stop, since he had never had a history of it. But it didn't. I wanted our life back on track, and I voiced becoming abstinent until we got married. It was then that my husband raped me and found out not long afterward I would become pregnant. At one point, he started stating promises and change. He said he was excited to be a father and he was going to be better for us all. But he wasn't. Once I had my precious son AJ, it got worse and I had to leave to protect my son. To shorten a longer story, AJ, my son conceived in rape, saved my life. Though some would say I am busier today because of him, I say I am privileged to be able to pour into his life and to call him my son. Yes, a privilege. His existence is the best thing that's ever happened. Me wanting him or not wanting him does not lessen the value he ever held the day life began within my womb. I am better today in so many ways because I chose to keep him and cherish him. Robin is now married to a Christian man who has adopted her son AJ. She's happy and AJ's happy, and it's really encouraging to see. I think about how 1% of abortions happen because the mother has been raped. In New Zealand, the laws state that rape will be taken into consideration for an abortion, but it is not grounds for an abortion necessarily. In the United States, rape is grounds for an abortion, but so is inconvenience. My friend Abby Johnson, who is a former abortion clinic director, was here a couple months ago, and she called one of your local abortion clinics. I believe it was the one in Auckland. And she was shocked when she asked them some questions to find out that they don't follow the abortion laws here in New Zealand. And it is much easier to get an abortion here in New Zealand than your laws say that it should be. I read something earlier as well that says that the abortion rates in New Zealand are equal to the abortion rates in the United States, which means if you had more people living in New Zealand, your abortion rates would be equal to ours And we have a shocking number, as I mentioned yesterday, of 4,000 babies being aborted every single day in the United States. That's 4,000 too many abortions every single day. When I was in high school, I met a boy, and I was about 16, and his name was Gregory. And Gregory was severely autistic. He still is today, but he was a functioning, severely autistic boy. He was quiet. A lot of times he was embarrassed. He was ashamed. I remember talking to him most of high school, and he would cover his face as we would talk because he didn't want me to see him. Most people, I guess the reason he felt that way was because most people in my high school, they wouldn't speak to him. They wouldn't talk to him. They made fun of him. They were mean to him. Some of them beat him up. Gregory had a hard time in high school, but I always had a soft spot in my heart for people like Gregory. And so I befriended Gregory, and I would go eat lunch with Gregory 3 to 4 times a week. Me and my girlfriend would go eat with him, and we went to his special needs dance, and we danced with him, and we've kept in touch with him over the years. One thing's for sure, regardless of what the world says, regardless of how those people treated Gregory in high school, regardless of his autism, Gregory is happy. Gregory is happy. He's always smiling. Gregory actually still to this day, I graduated high school almost 10 years ago, and Gregory still calls me and my parents every single week. He emails us every single week, and he sends packages every single week. He does this to my friends too, because he knows the value of a friendship. He saw how we reached out to him, and we didn't do that much. We didn't spend that much time with him, but we saw that his life was worth it. We saw that he was hurting, but at the same time that he was happy. And so we've kept up with him over the years, and about a year ago, Gregory, he had moved out of our state, and he came back and he said, "Claire, can you meet me? I'd love to see you. I haven't seen you in 8 years or so." And I said, "Sure, Gregory, I'll meet you." And so I met him, and he had brought along some artwork, and it was incredible artwork. And he said, I did this, I painted this. And my work, it's in these galleries, and it's in these shops, and people are buying it, and they're seeing it. And who would have thought that Gregory, that boy, that nobody noticed, that the world would see as someone that could be grounds for an abortion, that he would become this guy that does these incredible paintings. He's incredibly talented. And he gave me one of his paintings, and okay, here's the time for you to laugh at Texans again. He gave me one of these paintings, and it was of Johnny Cash. And he didn't know at the time, but my daughter's name is Sadie June. And if you put it together, Johnny Cash was married to June Carter. And so yes, my daughter is named after June Carter Cash. And so he gave me this painting, and I still have it. It's incredible. But it's so sad to think that his life is often viewed as something that's not worth fighting for, when God made him perfect, just like you and me and the other people that I've talked about. Yesterday, I mentioned that I had been studying to be a nurse when God threw me out of my comfort zone. And at that time, I was working in home health care, and I saw this ad about taking care of this man in his home, and so I applied and I got the job. And that's when I met Bill. Bill, he was a successful baseball player. He actually played some professional baseball in his early 20s. And he was a father and he was a husband. And in his early 20s, Bill had a horse accident where this horse bucked him off and he fell on his neck and he became paralyzed from his neck down from that time on for the rest of his life. Bill is a quadriplegic. Bill lives his life in his wheelchair and he needs total care. And so I applied for this job to take care of Bill. I transferred Bill from his bed to his wheelchair, from his wheelchair to his bed. I pushed his wheelchair into his shower and I bathed him. I brushed his hair, I brushed his teeth. To use the restroom, he had to be catheterized. I did that. Bill couldn't do his laundry. Bill couldn't feed himself. Bill couldn't do most anything that you and I can do. The world would look at Bill and think, what's the point? What's the point? But Bill lived life. Bill still, even though he had that accident, he loved horses, and he had this ranch where he kept some horses, and we would go out there. And the horses, animals are really cool because they know when something isn't right. Like my dog knew when I was pregnant, and she would sleep outside my door to protect me. And these horses knew that Bill needed them to be gentle with him, and they would lay their head right here on Bill's shoulders and they would love on Bill. Bill liked music, and so he said, Claire, can we go downtown? Can we go dancing? And I said, sure, Bill, let's go. And so I took Bill downtown dancing, and he spun his wheelchair around on the dance floor. And he had the best time. And he said, Claire, I want to go swimming. I said, okay, Bill, we'll go swimming. He had a pool in his backyard, and so his wife, his incredible wife that has taken care of him and stayed with him after all this time, we put him in the pool, and I held his arms under his shoulders like this, and his body went out, and he swam in the pool. Bill's life was priceless. Bill taught his daughter even to play softball. As I mentioned, he was a baseball player, and he taught his daughter to play softball by using his words, telling her what to do from his wheelchair. His daughter went on to play softball, baseball in the university. Bill lived life, and Bill lived life well. I have a friend who was a drug addict, and I knew her in high school, and we've kept in touch, and she had told me lots of lies. I never knew what to believe, if it was true what she was telling me, but I always wanted to. I always wanted to give her a chance, and so Kendall was her name, and Kendall, a couple years ago, she called me and she said, Claire, I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. And so I referred her to my friend at the pregnancy center. And Kendall has now been drug-free for 2 years, and she had her daughter about a year ago. God created Kendall to be someone better than what she thought she could be. And Kendall is now a mother she's a great mother, and she's working all these jobs, and she's getting herself out of debt, and she's getting her life back together so that she and her daughter can live a full life. God created her with worth. My friend Grace, I met her when she was homeless, and I took her into my home for about 2 months, and she told me, Claire, there's no ministry for people like me, for people like my baby. None of us know where we can go for help, but we sure know where the nearest abortion clinic is. Every single person knows where the abortion clinic is. And so I helped her, and she's now living on her own, and she's doing good. And actually Wednesday, when I got off my plane here, I saw the message that Grace had her baby. She had a healthy baby. Most people, and I myself for a long time, we don't take the time to see how valuable, how priceless people like Grace and her baby are. When I first found out that I had been affected by abortion, I walked into the Coalition for Life, which led the 40 Days for Life, and they said, "What are you here for?" And I told them, and they said, "Oh, we thought you were here to meet Abby Johnson." And I said, "Who's Abby?" And they said Abby was running an abortion clinic for 8 years when she saw an ultrasound-guided abortion, and she changed her mind. And she left the abortion industry for good, and she's now working on our side to save children's lives every day. And we became friends. Only God could orchestrate a friendship like that, an abortion provider and an abortion survivor. But he did. And these people had been out there, and they had been out there praying for her all those years, and they knew that Abby's life was worth fighting for. And 8 years later, she walked out of that abortion clinic, and as Abby and I got to know each other, we began working together, and we now work for a ministry called And Then There Were None, where we help abortion clinic workers leave the abortion industry, find jobs outside of the abortion industry, and provide emotional and spiritual healing retreats for them. And we were talking one day, and we had seen recently that there was an abortion doctor, Dr. Patel, who had recently been in the news, and the headlines, what they said were, Dr. Patel was arrested this week and charged with 3 counts of obtaining money under a false pretense after he was caught telling a woman who was not pregnant that she was expecting and prescribing abortion-induced drugs. Patel has also been repeatedly accused of sexually abusing his patients and has a string of malpractice accusations. What we found was that Dr. Patel worked near where my birth mother had had her abortion, and so we started doing some research as we noticed that his list of accusations were mostly on little girls that were between the ages of 10 and 14, and my birth mother fit right in there. And so we began to do research, and we believe wholeheartedly that we found the doctor that did, in fact, perform my birth mother's abortion, as he was the only doctor in that area at that time. And so my natural response should have been anger and hurt. And it was a little bit, but then I realized, I said to myself what I had said to so many people over the years, that the only way to win this fight is with love. The only way to win is with love. And so I decided to write Dr. Patel a letter. And I don't have time. I was hoping to read the whole thing to you, but I don't have time to read the whole thing to you, but I want to read you just a little bit. I shared with him my story and how the abortion had affected me and begged him to leave the abortion industry. And then I said, Dr. Patel, I write not only to shed light on the reality of the severe aftermath that can happen when abortions are performed, but to also express my forgiveness to you for what happened. I have lived a full life and been well loved in my 26 years of life despite my circumstances. I was adopted into an incredible home that gave more grace and forgiveness than I could ever have asked for. In the same way I have been forgiven by God for many things, I choose to forgive you. I forgive you for performing the abortion in 1988 and for the enormous impact it has had on my birth mother and me. I also pray for you. I pray for you that you are able to see past the medicine, the money, and your usual way of life, and that you will remember my face and my daughter's face, who would not be here had the abortion been successful, as you go to perform abortions. I pray that as you remember my face, you will be moved in such a way to walk away from the abortion practice and use your gifts outside of the industry. I assure you that many of us, myself included, would help you leave the industry and be encouragers and supporters to you. I would welcome you with open arms because I fully believe your life and what you do with your life is just as valuable as every single unborn child that I advocate for. I will continue to pray for you and your past and former patients. Claire Culwell. I never heard back from Dr. Patel. I believe the only way, though, to discuss abortion, to bring people out of the abortion industry, to change people's minds on abortion, and to save people's lives is through loving them. God writes each of our stories. He wrote these people's stories that I shared. He wrote them perfectly. Every one of our stories, all of you, are just a few stories of God's bigger plan, of his bigger purpose, as he writes his love story for all of us. In Psalm 139, it says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth." So, our lives are precious. To be pro-life is to be for all life, for the mothers, for the fathers, for the babies, for the children, no matter the complications. So I encourage you to continue to stand up, to speak up, and to fight. To be pro-life is to follow the heart of God. Thank you for doing that. Candy, kiwi-flavored candy. So I went into the store and I asked the guy, I said, I want to buy some kiwi-flavored candy that I can't find at home that you only sell in New Zealand. And he said, kiwi-flavored candy? I said, oh yeah, kiwi lollies. And he said, oh, okay. And he starts pulling out these chocolate-covered candies or lollies, chocolate-covered lollies and pineapple-flavored lollies and sour lollies. Needless to say, I didn't walk out of that store with any kiwi-flavored lollies. And I thought, this is so strange. And I got in the car and I kind of forgot about it. And then as I kept meeting people, I realized, oh my gosh, kiwi is what you call yourselves, so kiwi lollies means they're only found here. And so I kind of laughed at myself and I told this story, and the lady that was driving us around, she said, oh yeah, I love lollies, I'm a lollyholic. And I laughed. Another thing that's been funny, different little saying is she'll ask me, "Do you need anything out of the boot?" And I'm looking down at her boots and I'm thinking, what do you mean, do I need anything out of your boot? It's called the trunk in Texas. Well, we were driving out into the country, or into the boondocks, as we call it, and she said, "Oh, aren't these some lovely wop-wops?" I just laughed. We took some tiki tours, and she told us all about her rallies, and I thought, what in the world are rallies? And she said, you know, those people we're related to, and all I could think of was Eminem going, "Yo, yo, these are my rallies." It's been a really fun time being here. I had to get y'all back, you see, because you laughed so much at Texans yesterday. Well, I know.
It took a little while for her to say to Jesus, "I'll do it in God's way, not mine." And she credits her Christian upbringing for allowing her to receive all that disturbing information from her birth mother with grace and with mercy. And she told us how she found herself moved to compassion for her birth mother, particularly after hearing the anguish and the regret that her birth mother had endured for all those years. I think we will seldom meet a woman more resilient than Claire is. And it gives me great pleasure to ask Claire to address us again on her topic, "Life is always worth it." Claire.
Good afternoon again. Y'all enjoying the conference? Yeah? Good. Well, yesterday I told y'all we talked about some funny stereotypes that we have about, or that y'all have about Texans. We wear cowboy boots and cowboy hats and live in our houses with our guns and fishing poles, and a lot of that was true, and I just wanted to share a few things that I've learned that you say in New Zealand that are a little bit different than what we say at home. So, a couple days ago, we were driving to Tauranga, and did I say it right? We were driving there, and I was asking the lady that was driving us around, I said, I want to take some things home that I can't find at home, you know, for my family and for kids. And she said, okay, well, we have a lot of kiwi lollies here. And I thought, okay, kiwi flavored lollipops or lolly doodle, what is a kiwi lolly? And she said, it's candy. And I thought, oh, okay. There may be some people here that weren't here yesterday, and I just want to give a recap of a little bit of what I talked about yesterday. I'm adopted, and my sister had met her birth mother a few years ago, and I got to thank my sister's birth mother for my sister, and it made me realize that I hadn't taken the time to thank my birth mother, and so I decided I would do that. And when I met my birth mother, she told me that I had actually survived her abortion, and I was actually a twin, and my twin had not survived the abortion, but I had, and so my life is a miracle. And when I was born, I had a lot of complications, and I was born at 3 pounds, which is 1.5 kilos. And so anyway, I shared a lot about that yesterday, and getting out of our comfort zone and getting involved in pro-life activities, but even more so talking about it in your communities and talking about it with your family and your friends, because